right. Thanks everybody for joining. And so excited to be here with you today. I'm Iowa City Mayor Bruce Teague. And today we are really happy to host an opportunity for people when we're talking about how Iowa should regulate marijuana like alcohol. And so I did want to welcome everyone to the press conference, as well as thank a few individuals that has made this possible. Senator Janet Peterson, we want to thank you. And of course, Senator Joe Balcom. We appreciate all the work that you've done in bringing us together today. With all of our speakers, we want to say thank you, our elected officials, and those that have endorsed marijuana reform. We appreciate all your efforts and the things that you've done. And I did want to just switch over and talk about a little housekeeping today. So I'm going to help us navigate through this time together. I'm going to soon introduce the speakers, and then we'll open it up for questions and answers from our media. And so I'll tell you that it's been a pleasure and a privilege to welcome you all alongside our fellow elected officials of all levels and from across the state who agree it's time for marijuana reform in Iowa. 1 out of 3 Americans live in the US where adults can legally use marijuana, including our fellow Midwestern states of Michigan, South Dakota, and our neighboring state of Illinois. In total, 15 states and the District of Columbia have already charted a course of how regulating marijuana like alcohol can replace an illicit market with thousands of new jobs, tax revenues for essential services, access for medical needs, and time for law enforcement to shift their focus to more serious crimes. Today, we will hear from some of the elected officials who have been working to make this a reality in Iowa. And while there may be several different paths to marijuana reform and many solutions and ideas to consider, we're all here today because we agree that when it comes to the growing medical need, the economic opportunity, and overdue racial equity and social justice, regulating marijuana like alcohol is the right thing to do. Thank you again for your attention to this important issue. And now I'm going to actually ask our first representative that's going to speak to us, Mary Wolf from Clinton. Welcome, Mary.
Mary.
Okay, let's try that again. Sorry. So good afternoon. As our host said, my name is Mary Wolf, and I represent Iowa House District 98, which covers the northeastern half of Clinton County. I'm an attorney. I graduated from the University of Iowa College of Law almost 30 years ago, and ever since then, I've practiced law in Clinton, representing people charged with crimes. Because I've spent decades representing Iowans charged with misdemeanor marijuana offenses, I am extremely familiar with the statutory law criminalizing marijuana and with the in real life impact of these laws. A marijuana conviction or even an arrest can have draconian direct and collateral consequences. Citizens convicted of possessing a small amount of marijuana often end up owing hundreds and sometimes thousands of dollars in fines, surcharges, and attorney fees, and they can be required to spend time in jail or, in some circumstances, time in prison. And that also adds to their costs. These direct consequences are in and of themselves out of proportion to any harm that might be posed by possessing a small amount of marijuana. But even more problematic is the short and long-term negative impact that a misdemeanor marijuana conviction can have on a person's employment opportunities. Over the years, I have received countless calls from clients and just citizens who are devastated because they have just found out that a marijuana conviction from years, sometimes decades ago, is standing in the way of their opportunity to get a great job. And, you know, up until recently, there was nothing we can do about that. A few years ago, the House actually did provide a mechanism whereby one marijuana conviction and lifetime can be expunged. So that's good. But again, there are people, especially people of color, who end up with multiple misdemeanor marijuana convictions on their record just because they happen to be the kind of person that law enforcement focuses on. And these people, again, can lose employment opportunities and ultimately end up losing hundreds of thousands of dollars in potential income. Additionally, arresting, prosecuting, convicting, jailing, and then attempting to collect fines is a ridiculously complicated and expensive process. The amount of resources, both financial and judicial, that goes into this process is, again, way out of proportion to any benefit that Iowa might see from continuing to criminalize marijuana. What I know, what I've seen firsthand, is that Iowa's laws criminalizing possession of small amounts of marijuana are irrational and inconsistently enforced and have overly punitive consequences. It is, I believe, that it is high time for the Iowa General Assembly to work together in a bipartisan and transparent manner to legalize and regulate marijuana in our state, with a focus on what has and hasn't worked in the many other states, including Illinois, which is right over the bridge from me, that have already traveled down this path. We want to ensure that Iowa's marijuana reform legislation is reasonable, responsible, realistic, and responsive to all legitimate safety concerns. That is not something that can happen in one session or, you know, even in a term. And so I am excited to be a part of this coalition, and I look forward to investigating, exploring all the various options available to us as we move forward with marijuana legalization and regulation. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Wolf. We really appreciate your words. The next person that we're going to have come and share their support for marijuana reform is going to be Black Hawk County Supervisor Chris Schwartz from Waterloo. Welcome.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Teague. Legalization of marijuana in Iowa is the morally just, financially responsible, popular, and pro-growth action that the Iowa legislature must take. It is morally just because since the very start of the war on pot, it has ripped families apart, sent them into economic ruin, blocked economic and educational opportunities for individuals unfortunate enough to get caught. All of this happens disproportionately to Black and Brown individuals, making it a large part of the institutionalized racism that we must dismantle in our state. Here in Waterloo, Iowa's my most diverse city, this has been a decades-long injustice that simply must stop. It is the financially responsible thing to do because we currently waste insane sums of money investigating, arresting, and prosecuting individuals for marijuana crimes, while at the same time forcing people into an untaxed, unregulated black market. These wasted expenditures and untapped revenue streams create a huge burden on local governments, especially counties and cities, at the cost of actual priorities like mental health, conservation, recreation, education, economic development, and infrastructure. It is the popular thing to do that is supported by everyday Iowans of every political stripe and demographic background. If Iowa were a ballot initiative state, legalization would have already taken place because that is the will of the people that live here. Instead, we must depend on the courage of those they elect to represent them. It's the pro-growth thing to do because the fact is that Iowa is not growing fast enough, and our state's young people are leaving in droves. Waterloo, for example, needs around 8,000 more residents to support the infrastructure of this city, which we have not yet reached the population height it had in the 1980s before the farm crisis. The ability to purchase, grow, and recreationally consume marijuana is a serious quality of life issue, as is the desire of young people to live in forward-thinking, progressive communities. In this new world of virtual workspaces, where more and more folks have the ability to remotely work from anywhere in the country, including Iowa, with our affordable and often historic housing stocks, our good schools that could be great again, we could be positioned to attract and retain many of these families, but not without progressive reforms, including marijuana legalization. Legalization simply must happen, and it must happen soon, or Iowa will be left behind in a future that will be dominated by progressive, forward-thinking change. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Supervisor Schwartz. The next individual we're going to bring is Lynn County Supervisor Stacy Walker from Cedar Rapids.
Thank you, Mayor Teague. I really appreciate that. My thanks to Senator Peterson and Senator Balcom for spearheading this effort and bringing us all together. Over half the states in the union have some form of legalized cannabis. If we follow suit here in Iowa and fully legalize marijuana, we can make progress on multiple fronts. We can add millions of dollars of revenue to the state coffers. We can create new jobs in production, retail, and logistics, boosting an economy ravaged by the global pandemic. We would also save precious resources in our criminal legal system, cutting down on court backlogs and allowing law enforcement officials to focus on actual crime. We would further the cause of racial justice. And finally, we could introduce a new and sustainable market for our farmers, who, as we all know, lead the world in innovation and production. But I want to go back to the previous point I made that Supervisor Schwartz hit on, and that is furthering the cause of racial justice. And I'll do that by quickly reading just three stats for you all here. The first, law enforcement made more than 6.1 million marijuana-related arrests from 2010 to 2018. And in 2018 alone, there were almost 700,000 marijuana arrests, which accounted for more than 43% of all drug arrests. The next one, by 2014, marijuana accounted for nearly half of the 1.5 million drug arrests nationally. And today, there are more people behind bars for a drug offense than the number of people who were in prison or jail for any crime in 1980, during sort of the height of, or the beginning rather, of the drug war here in America. And you may ask, why does all of this matter? Why does it relate to racial justice? Well, I'll end with this last statistic. In every state, and in over 96% of the counties examined, Black people were much more likely to be arrested than white people for marijuana possession. And overall, these disparities have not improved. On average, a Black person is nearly 4 times more likely to be arrested for marijuana possession than a white person, even though Black and white people use marijuana in similar rates. In 10 states, Black people were more than 5 times likely to be arrested. And as has been pointed out time and time again, that African Americans are not only arrested at higher rates, prosecuted at higher rates, but found guilty at higher rates and sentenced to harsher punishments. This is a racial justice issue. This is something we can solve for. This is something that is gaining popularity. It's practical. States, over half the states in the union are traveling down this path. And I do believe that this is a Green New Deal that everyone can support. And I'm honored to be a part of this coalition. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Really appreciate your words. As you can tell, we have very committed people that want to see some reform. And following up is a city councilor from Des Moines, and his name is Josh Mandelbaum. Welcome, Josh.
Thank you. And I want to thank Senators Balcom and Peterson for organizing today's event. I also want to thank all of my fellow elected officials who have signed on to this effort. Back in June, I co-sponsored a resolution to create a marijuana task force in Des Moines. And we did that. We created that task force because we know that criminalization of marijuana has not had an impact on marijuana usage, but it has created additional costs for communities and for individuals. We created the task force because we know that an arrest for possession of marijuana can have an impact on housing, student loans, future employment, child custody determinations, and so much more that can alter a person's life forever. We created the task force because we know there is a significant racial disparity in the way our marijuana laws are enforced. In Iowa, a Black person is over 7 times more likely to get arrested for marijuana possession than a white person, despite data showing marijuana usage is roughly the same among Blacks and whites. And we created the task force because our community has consistently and persistently been pleading with us to address this disparity. What we saw from our task force is a succinct overview of the legal limitations that current state law imposes. The task force provided a series of recommendations broken down by state policies that our council should support and local actions that our council can take. And these recommendations can be a roadmap for Des Moines and other communities in our state. And I fully support the full set of recommendations. But the most important task force recommendation is why we are here today. That task force recommended that the council support and work towards state legislation to legalize marijuana possession. The best way to solve this issue is to solve it statewide and comprehensively for everyone who is impacted. And I'm proud that so many folks on my council and across the state are here to support this work. Legalizing marijuana is an important way to move towards racial justice and to create a community and state that works better for everyone. We look forward to having more elected officials join us in this fight and making legalization a reality in our state. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Mandelbaum. And next, we're going to hear from State Senator Jackie Smith from Sioux City. Welcome.
Well, thank you. And I'll be brief. I am very excited to be part of this coalition and so many people that are so talented. Listen, the facts are marijuana is less toxic than alcohol. It's less addictive. And states that have legalized it have created, thousands of jobs. We've been able to refocus law enforcement resources and on more serious problems. And you know what? Iowa should do the same. Now, my district, Sioux City, we're a tri-state area. And I think you mentioned at the beginning that South Dakota is going to legalize come July 1st, 2021, marijuana. Well, it's going to create problems for us as a border county. And anyone who lives in a border county knows that. So I don't want our law enforcement to be, taxed with the responsibility of sitting at the bridge and waiting for people to come back. And I don't want to see Iowa money leave the state and go to another state. So it really makes the playing field uneven. And as long as it's not harmful and folks are doing it anyway, it's time to get on the bandwagon and get Iowa moving forward. Thank you.
Really appreciate you being with us today. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
I'm going to bring on Representative Ross Wilbur from Ames, Iowa. And I have to just send a quick shout out because he was the first Black mayor in Iowa City. And so welcome, Representative Ross Wilbur.
Thank you, Mr. Merritt, and good to see you. So I am State Representative Ross Wilbur here in Ames, and thank you everybody for being here. In 2020, there was a historic effort aimed at reform in our justice systems here in Iowa. The state legislature unanimously passed the More Perfect Union bill, and Governor Reynolds signed it. That effort was a critical acknowledgement that in many ways, there are unfair and unjust practices here in Iowa in the law, many of which result in disproportionate negative impacts on people of color. And in 2019, more than 5,000 Iowans were convicted of marijuana possession. And over the decades, tens of thousands of Iowans, their families have suffered irreparable economic and social harm from a criminal marijuana possession record. And for too many, that's led to a lifetime of economic insecurity. Iowa taxpayers currently spend millions of dollars a year to punish adults for marijuana use. And these efforts are strongly biased against Iowans of color. And it's got to be reformed. In 2019, a study by the ACLU found that while Black Iowans use marijuana at the same rate as white Iowans, it's been said they are more than 7 times more likely to be arrested for marijuana possession. Now think about that. Iowa taxpayers were on the hook for tens of millions annually for this failure. There are multiple costs as Iowans pick up an enormous financial tab for unfair policing and criminal justice system, and the cost of the social safety net to support thousands of families that deal with the economic chaos resulting from a criminal record. Now, while legalization will bring its own set of challenges, those will be less harmful to Iowans than marijuana prohibition. 15 states now regulate marijuana like recreational alcohol, including states here in the Midwest. And they are dealing with those challenges from which we can learn. If we take the step and follow their lead into legislation, we're not even having the conversation here. Now, Iowa is one of several states that's suing pharmaceutical companies for their role in the opioid crisis. And while settlements happen across the country in those lawsuits and really what amounts to a financial slap on the hand to Big Pharma, here in Iowa, we sit punishing Iowans for something that has potential benefits for individuals and families with less harmful effects. I've heard from people here in Ames, Story County, and across Iowa that the social cost of ignoring marijuana reform is far too high, and Iowa will continue to lead the nation in disparate treatment, and we will show we are not a welcoming state.
Thank you so much. So we've heard from state representatives, state senators, as well as city council member on why reform is so important. And thank you for all the work that you've been doing so far. I'm going to bring up our last speaker before we go into our questions and answers. And the last speaker is going to be our state representative, Joe Balcom, who will give an overview of the legislative proposals for 2021 related to marijuana legislation. Welcome, Senator Balcom.
Thank you, Your Honor. I appreciate you leading this call today, and you have a beautiful Christmas tree in your background. It's just gorgeous. Let me thank all my colleagues that have signed on to this effort, especially those that have taken a leadership role in speaking today on this call, and as well as my colleague, Senator Janet Peterson, who helped bring us all together. Marijuana prohibition has been a costly failure. It's ending across America because it has caused far more harm than good. It's broken up too many families, upended too many livelihoods, thrown too many children into poverty, and has taken a lifetime financial toll on too many Iowans. Over the decades, tens of thousands of Iowans have suffered irreparable economic and social harm from a criminal marijuana possession conviction. For too many, it has paved the way for a lifetime of economic insecurity. In 2019 alone, more than 5,000 Iowans were convicted of marijuana possession. Iowa taxpayers pay twice. They pay higher local property taxes as they pick up an enormous financial tab for an unfair policing and criminal justice system, and they pay higher state taxes for the cost of the social safety net to support thousands of families that deal with the economic calamity resulting from an arrest or a criminal record. In the upcoming legislative session, bills will be introduced in both the Iowa House and Iowa Senate to end this economic and social turmoil. One bill will establish a framework like we see in 15 other states, home to 1 in 3 Americans, that have chosen to regulate marijuana like they regulate alcohol. We are drafting a bill that will create thousands of new jobs, expunge marijuana possession convictions, and create significant new financing for mental health, substance abuse, and education. A second bill will end Iowa's harsh criminal penalties and decriminalize the possession of small amounts of marijuana for personal use. It will also expunge marijuana possession convictions for the same. Iowa needs to catch up. 26 states already have decriminalized small amounts of marijuana. 15 states already allow expungement of marijuana possession convictions. Iowa should do the same. And finally, a third bill would give local governments the authority to decriminalize small amounts of marijuana. While a majority of Iowans now support regulating marijuana like alcohol, these bills are going nowhere without bipartisan support. In fact, Republicans are the only ones that can launch a new era of rational and just marijuana policy. We are hopeful that a bipartisan effort will develop to do just that. Today, 39 Iowa elected leaders for the first time have come together as one to publicly and courageously call for marijuana reform. We warmly invite more of our state and local elected officials to join our efforts. If you think marijuana prohibition has caused more harm than good, is a costly waste of your money, is a government infringement on your liberty, or think Iowa's unequal enforcement of the marijuana laws is unjust, it's time to speak up for change. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Senator Balcom, for, again, your words today and your work through the years on marijuana reform. And we really appreciate this defining moment that we're in today. At this time, we're going to ask for media that would like to have ask any questions during this time. Just please chime right in. I think we have the option of having ours of them speak. Is their mics on?
Oh, hi, can you hear me?
Yes, please tell us who you are and who you're with.
Yep, this is Lynn Taw with Iowa Capitol Dispatch. My question is, do you have any Republican legislators on board right now with this initiative?
Well, I'd be happy to take a shot at that. This Senator Balcom, I think it was December 21st of last month, I sent an email actually to every member of the General Assembly, including all the members of the Republican caucus. And I also included in that email the 29 new members of the General Assembly that'll start on January 11th. And I received one response from a Republican legislator. We do not have any legislators at this point from the State House that have publicly said they were ready to work for marijuana reform. So we have work to do to put together a bipartisan effort in that regard.
Yeah. Do you have any specific plans to try to get them on board?
I think members will be, you've got several legislators that have spoken. They can speak to this when I stop. Yeah, I think our work is to, when we get back to the Capitol next week, is to try and begin those conversations one-on-one with members of the Republican caucus to see if we can find a couple leaders in their caucus to really work with their own members. A lot of times in the General Assembly, you spend a lot of time talking to your own members about policy issues, and we need to find a couple of advocates in the Republican caucus to begin the process of rounding up some more help.
This is Representative Wilbur. This is Representative Wilbur. I just wanted to add to what Senator Balcom had said, and maybe Senator Peterson might even be gone here too. I think part of the notion of today, as I understood it, as Joe and Janet approached me, is that we want to set the tone for a conversation as opposed to throwing up the D and throwing up the R. Let's at least talk about something, and we haven't had a chance to do that. And that, in some ways, it takes courage to do that. I've spoken at the local level to some county and city level folks who are Republican, and some who identify as libertarian because of the issue about government regulation. And there's interest, there's acknowledgement about the disproportionate impact on people of color. And I think several of them are waiting to see what's going to happen. And we're just trying to beckon participation. I'm done.
I'd just like to chime in here too and say, when we did the Smoke-Free Air Act several years ago, the public was way further along in where they wanted to see the state go than lawmakers. And it took the courage of the public to step up and reach out to their lawmakers to let them know that they supported us moving to have smoke-free workplaces across the state. And I see the same maybe will be holding true with this initiative as well. As we need Iowans to engage in the conversation with their local lawmakers and help us build a bipartisan coalition. It's going to take all Iowans working together to get this done.
Thank you. Thank you all. And would anyone else from the media like to ask a question?
Hi,
Please.
this is Stephen Gruber Miller with the Des Moines Register. Along similar lines, the governor has said repeatedly that she's not open to legalizing marijuana in Iowa. But at the same time, she's obviously talked about making changes to the criminal justice system, particularly with an eye on racially disparate impacts. I wonder if there are ways that you feel like you can work together with her on this issue, even if it's not full legalization.
This is Senator Balcom. I threw out 3 different ideas on the policy level. I think decriminalization is another policy. If Iowans are not ready to move to regulating marijuana like alcohol, we should at least come together around decriminalizing small amounts of marijuana for personal use and turn it into some sort of civil citation rather than a criminal record. And maybe there's some common ground to be found on maybe a shorter step in terms of marijuana reform.
Great.
Joe, can I just add something real quick?
Please identify yourself.
Yeah, I'm Dale Todd, Cedar Rapids, Iowa City Council. It's not as if these discussions have not happened before. I was involved in 2014 when we initially got medical marijuana passed. And that's a discussion that has been ongoing ever since then. And part of that discussion has been the creation of a bipartisan coalition of lawmakers that has helped get that done. So it's not like we're walking in cold to have this discussion. A lot of this discussion has already happened. It just hasn't gotten to the point where people have been willing to put their name behind has been mentioned so eloquently before. Let's just have this conversation. I mean, it's time to at least get the discussion out here. So that's
Great. Thank you. Anyone else from media have a question? Hearing no one, I really want to just take this opportunity to thank everyone for being a part of today. For those that have tuned in through Facebook, we really appreciate you taking the time to listen to those that have presented today. And even for the ones that haven't spoken, I imagine that we all have our own desires that we would like to see happen within our state. It's been mentioned that we have a role to play, we have a part to play. If you want to see change in our state, reach out to your legislators. It does matter. Your voice does matter. Let them know how you feel about marijuana in our state. Thanks again to all of our speakers. We really appreciate the work that you're doing. Many of you have been doing this work for a long time. We've heard you. We appreciate you. And we acknowledge your work. We know that it can get tiresome, but we need you to go a little bit further. And you're being here today. Let us know that you're determined to make a difference in our state. Thanks again for everyone for being here. And we really do hope that our message reach everyone that is a legislator within our state, because we need bipartisan involvement. Governor, we're looking towards you to listen to the people of our state, and let's make some real change when it comes down to marijuana reform. Thanks everybody for being a part of today. We ask that you continue to tune in with this group because we're going to have some future efforts towards marijuana reform. Thanks again for your attendance today, and we wish everyone an awesome and amazing day. Take care.